You're listening to Under the Shell Podcast, the best in America.
Welcome to Under the Shell, presented by Testudo Times. I'm Brennan Weissel.
Sam Jane, back in business.
Michael House.
And this week, we went as far under the shell as we've gone before, as we brought on the Senior Director of Football Equipment Operations, Drew Hampton, talking about what goes on behind the scenes to get the jerseys ready, all the equipment to away games. Great interview. Take it away.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You mentioned briefly about your family and working for the Jets. Do you think you would have been in this position if your family hadn't all kind of been in the business?
I don't think so, to be completely honest. Like I mentioned, my dad working for the Jets for 36 years, it gave me an opportunity to grow up around football and be a part of his operation as much as I possibly could growing up. When most kids spent their summers at the beach or going away to camp, we spent our summers with our dad at training camp. And while we were there, it was never a free ride. It was always an opportunity to lend a hand or do some work. It was incumbent upon us to pull our weight while we were there working with my dad. But, it opened some doors for us and exposed me to equipment and working with athletes. It was something that I loved a great deal. I remember daydreaming in junior high school, wishing I was at work with my dad. And I've had the good fortune of following in his footsteps, and it's something I truly love to do.
So I mentioned your title at the beginning of the episode, but what actually does your day-to-day life look like? Is it the same every day, or different on game days and stuff? Take us through that.
I would say it's the same week to week. It's kind of like Groundhog Day, but it's a week to week thing, and a lot of that depends whether you're playing at home or you're playing on the road. For example, today we'll start on Mondays, or let's start on Sunday because it's the day after a game. The day after the game traditionally starts with us getting here around 8 a.m. and doing the laundry and everything else that's been presented to us from the previous day's game. Going through all the uniforms, checking the game jerseys and the pants for any rips or tears, making notes just in case we need to make any modifications or make any mends or repairs to the game uniforms. Like I said, doing all the laundry, not only for the players, when you're at home, you're doing laundry for roughly 120 players, but you're also doing laundry for roughly another 90 to 100 staff members. And that encompasses everybody from coaches to GAs to QCs to football operations personnel to video staff to athletic training staff and then strength staff and then equipment staff and then all the student managers that work in each one of those areas as well. So it's a pretty big undertaking. But I'm blessed that I work with some really good people. I've got two assistants here, Jason Smith, also known as Paco, and then Nat Park, who's been here. He was a graduate from University of Maryland, and he's been with the University of Maryland for over 20 years now. And then with the help of some really, really great young people and our student managers, they help this operation run pretty darn smoothly. So that's the Sunday. Monday we go back to practice. Monday is I'll get here about 7:00 in the morning. I'll go through some stuff. We'll do some business related stuff. We'll pay bills and that sort of thing. 10:30, I normally have a staff meeting. At that point, Coach Loxley will go through the daily schedule, what to expect during practice. About 2:00, our students will show up. When they get here at 2:00, they'll go out and set up the practice field with everything that the coaches need to run practice. And that consists of everything from, the tackling dummies to the pop-ups to the hand shields to the footballs. Just about anything you can imagine from a football training standpoint. And then we'll go through practice. Practice, depending on the day, starts in the afternoon after all our players get out of class. Some days it starts at 4, some days it starts at 5. And we're usually out there for 2 hours. I usually stand with coach the entirety of practice, just in case he needs anything. And I watch over the practice field to make sure everything's going as well as possible, make sure it's an efficient and clean run operation. And then at the conclusion of practice, we'll come in and we'll do all the laundry for everybody, coaches, players, and staff. But during that time, as we get to Monday, we're already starting to prepare for the following week, depending on whether it's a home game or a road game. So if it's a road game, we determine, okay, who we're going to play. So this week, we know we're playing University of Nebraska. I reach out to University of Nebraska and their head equipment manager, Jay Terry, to try to figure out what uniform they're going to wear. Even though more often than not, the home team will wear their color uniform. Like their red at home. Sometimes they have a specialty game where they wear a different color, or sometimes they opt to wear their white at home. So I got to find out what they're going to wear to make sure that whatever uniform they're wearing, we wear the opposites. So they're going to wear red this week, the traditional red uniforms. So we are going to wear, for the first time this year, we're going to wear an all-white uniform with an all-white helmet. It's going to be pretty darn awesome. So once we figure that out, we start packing. So we'll go. Nat Park does a great job for me. Like I said, he's one of my assistants. He does a great job coordinating the jerseys. We go through it together to make sure we can count for every single player that'll be on the travel roster, their jerseys, pants, their laundry loops. And so then we roll into Tuesday, and Tuesday is pretty much a copycat of Monday. You know, same thing, get here early, make sure we're here for the players when they start to get lift programs early in the morning. And go through another staff meeting, coordinate everything through Coach Loxley, make sure we're buttoned up as far as his practice plan for the day. In the afternoon, we'll go through another practice and then we start it all over. When it starts to get a little crazy is like when we go to a day like today, because Nebraska is so far away, we have to drive. It takes almost about 2 days to, not 48 hours, about 2 days driving time to get our trailer from College Park, Maryland to Lincoln, Nebraska. So that'll leave tomorrow at noontime. So during this week, Monday, Tuesday, and then through tomorrow morning, we're packing the truck for Nebraska. And we'll send everything. We'll send about 12,000 pounds worth of equipment. And that's just not equipment from my department. It's equipment from football operations. It's equipment from sports medicine, and it's equipment from our video department. So it's my responsibility that everything gets there safely and in a timely manner. So when the team arrives at the facility on Saturday for the game, everything's set and ready to go. But like I mentioned before, and I can't stress this enough, this operation and equipment, it's a collaborative effort. And, you know, I may sit in this chair, but none of this happens without the help from everybody else around. So we'll bump into Wednesday. So tomorrow morning, another normal morning, we get up, we get here early, make sure we're here for the players. Any players are doing lift, any players are getting treatment. We go through another staff meeting. Tomorrow, the truck will leave at approximately noon. We got to make sure everything is on it. We have a travel checklist or travel manifest to make sure everything's checked off that goes on the truck. And then they'll be off and on their way. And then we'll practice tomorrow afternoon. And then we'll practice on Thursday. And same thing, Groundhog Day all over again. And then Friday morning is the day of departure. We normally, if it's a closer game, like going to Ohio State, or going to Michigan, or going to Michigan State, or any of those other schools that are close in proximity, I'll normally leave Thursday night after practice, and we'll depart here about 6:30 p.m. and we will head on our merry way to wherever the destination is. Like a couple of weeks ago, we played Northwestern. You get on the bus at 6:30 at night, and you're on a 12-hour run on the bus to get to Illinois to play Northwestern. But it's great because you build camaraderie with the people that you work with and the students. And it's a grind, but we all do it because we love it. These kids that make the commitment to help us out, they do it because they love being around athletics, specifically football, and they love being around our players, coaches, and staff because it's working here in Jones Hill House and working for Coach Loxley and his staff has been a great experience, not just for me, but everybody that comes here to work. So Friday, the team will depart. And they usually depart sometime around 2:00. They'll arrive in the destination city. When they get there to the destination city, Coach Loxley likes for the team to stop by at the stadium on the way to their hotel. And when they stop by, they just do a site visit. They don't do a walkthrough or anything. It's just a site visit. And they'll walk through to see where the players' lockers are, where the coach's locker room is, where the athletic training room is, where the restrooms are. And then they'll walk out to the field to determine, which side is our bench area. So when they show up on Saturday for game day, they know all that stuff. It's not like the first time they've been there. Typically on Saturday on game day, we usually get there about 6 or 6.5 hours prior to the game. The team usually shows up about 2.5 hours prior to the game. And we're just there to go through just a series of checklists just to make sure everything is prepared for kickoff. Not just for the stuff that we have within the locker room to make sure everybody's uniforms, and cleats, and shoulder pads and are all set, but all the stuff that goes onto the field, our equipment trunk that's on our field, our coach communication system that allows the coaches to communicate with one another, from the sideline to the booth and vice versa. And then just everything else that goes into it. And then after the game, at the conclusion of the game, it normally takes us about 1 hour from the conclusion of the game to the time that the truck is leaving the facility and we're on our way to the airport or getting back on the bus to go home. And it's pretty amazing that we get 12,000 pounds worth of equipment, laundry, and all that other stuff packed up in under an hour to get back on our way to College Park.
How are those logistics going to change when, teams like USC, Washington, Oregon come in, where you could have, back-to-back weeks or, 2 games in 3 weeks where you're playing out in the Northwest, and that's a cross-country drive. How do you see that affecting your guys' A, budget, and B, like what does it look like when you're having to go cross-country for a conference?
Great point. I think it's something that we've already had internal discussions about our travel as it relates to going to the West Coast. I know next year in 2024, we have the good fortune of going out and playing the Oregon Ducks. I'm excited about going out there. But you're right, it does present some challenges. And I think right now, Brian Griffin, our chief of staff, Edie Picard, our director of football operations, I sit down with them and they formulated a plan they're going through right now with, with Damon Evans and Colleen Sorm to determine how we're going to attack this. So I don't think, from my perspective right now, I don't think it's going to be a traditional road trip because it would just take too long for our equipment to travel across country and then back after the game. So it's probably going to be a situation where maybe, hopefully, we go into a bigger aircraft and we just fly the stuff with us. But there are some other challenges, like our coach comp system. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's on the sideline. It looks like a big pit crew box in NASCAR. That's what allows all the coaches to communicate with one another, but that absolutely will not fit on an airplane. So we're in the process right now of talking to Coach Com about getting that pared down into maybe 3 smaller trunks that will allow us to fly with it so we can have our communication system on game day. But the cost is definitely going to be there, no doubt about it. I think the challenges of going to the West is just going to a place that you're unfamiliar with, getting to know, the facility, the stadium, the locker rooms. The logistical aspect is just all going to be new to everybody that travels. I think from an equipment perspective, when you go to some place that you're not familiar with, you got to learn all those things. Is it a synthetic playing surface? Is it a natural playing surface? If it's grass, what's the grass like? Traditionally, when you go to a place like Northwestern, it's a natural surface. It's a great playing surface, but the grass is longer, and you go up there and it's late in the year, it tends to be slippery. So you got to make accommodations for that. You have to make sure that you have multiple styles of cleats so the players have great footing when they're playing. So it's just so many different things that go into it. And as an equipment manager, you have to account for it because that's what the head coach expects, and that's what everybody expects when they hire you to do the job, to account for all those little things that maybe other people don't account for.
What about, like, in terms of the job? I was curious, job security based, because you worked in a couple different spots in the NFL. I saw, like, you were let go from, I believe it was the Jaguars, but
leaving the Jaguars kind of caught me off guard a little bit. It's a surprise. New ownership came in, and anytime new ownership comes into any situation, you just don't know. Working for the Jaguars was an amazing opportunity. Great organization. I had a good opportunity to work for Mr. Weaver, who founded the franchise in Jacksonville, and then Shad Khan, who's taken over as owner and has done an amazing job with that team. But you just, more often than not, it used to be back in the day in the NFL where if you got into a job in the NFL and you did your job, you could probably be there for 20 plus years. But things have changed these days. There's not as much of that going on anymore. It changes year to year. It changes with head coaches. It changes with ownership. So you just don't have that consistency that you used to have. So when I came here in 2015 to be the head equipment manager for University of Maryland, 2016, I'm sorry. And in 2021, Coach Loxley pulled me aside and I guess Damon Evans spoke to him and said that the Commanders reached out to see if I would be interested in joining their staff as their equipment manager. And it wasn't something that I initially had much of an interest in, but ultimately I took it because it gave me an opportunity to go back to the league. And it wasn't a redemption sort of thing. I just wanted to prove to myself that I can go back to the league and do the job. Because you know what, to be completely honest, the job that we do here at University of Maryland and the job that 32 NFL equipment managers are doing, it's the same job. We just deal with more people. That's all. It's the exact same job. And you deal with the same vendors, you deal with the same people. Sometimes you play in some of the same stadiums, but I went to Washington, and it was one of those things that even after I left and I'd been gone for 6 months or so, I held University of Maryland in such high regard. There's so many great people here to work for and work with, Damon and Colleen and Coach Loxley specifically, who I've formed a good friendship with, that I missed it. I missed it. My wife and kids tried to discourage me or dissuade me from going to Washington to the Commanders, but I took it. But then I got a call from Coach Loxley 2 years ago in August, just after we played after the Commanders played their last preseason game on a Thursday against the Baltimore Ravens, and he asked me if I wanted to come back. And you know what? It just felt right to come home, and so I let the Commanders know that I was going to come home to the University of Maryland, and I'm fortunate enough to be here in this chair because of it.
So if you could kind of break down, I know you mentioned you're right next to Loxley in practice. Is that the same on game day, and kind of go through some of, what can go wrong on game day?
I think from my perspective, when I'm next to Coach, I'm just always there to make sure that the communication system is working well. I carry a clipboard every single game in my hand, and it's got the call sheet. It's got a bunch of other stuff that's game related, as far as Coach Loxley's important notes and that sort of thing. And I keep them with me all the time on the clipboard. And I'm just there just in case, I'm there to put out fires just in case anything happens from, like I said, a communication standpoint. Coordinated with our two communications coordinators, Mike Nurse and Johnny Brown, have been with us for a long time. They do an amazing job. Knock on wood, we don't have any issues. But just there to do my job, because I think as an equipment manager, I think if you do all the things that we talked about from Monday through Friday and you prepare well, you don't have any situations that present themselves on Saturday. Sure, every once in a while there could be an equipment breakdown because you can't account for everything, and sometimes things just happen because they happen. And at that point, you address the issue, you meet the repair, and you get the player back out on the field. And in practice, I'm there because I'm just there. I carry his play sheet, and I also have the good fortune of blowing the horn. And I blow the horn just to, as the time, we time each practice, and each period is a different amount of time, whether it's 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 12 minutes. And at the conclusion of each period, I just blow the horn to signify that, so we know that we move on from hypothetically 7-on-7 to team or something like that. But yeah.
What's the biggest scare or mess up either on a game day that you guys have had where it was just holy shit, what is going on right now?
I don't want to jinx myself, but there are scares. There's anxiety every single Saturday, especially when you're on the road. The anxiety, even though I make communication with the visiting team equipment manager and I figure out what they're going to wear, there's two anxieties: getting out the pregame warm-up and you're both wearing your dark uniforms and figuring out that you brought the wrong uniform, which hasn't happened. It did happen while I was working in the NFL. We played the Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Falcons brought the wrong color uniform, so we switched. And our head coach wasn't too happy. He thought they did it on purpose, but they didn't do it on purpose. But it was just one of those things. And then forgetting something behind, something important, a player's helmet, a player's jersey, something important like that. That's anxiety you deal with when you travel. When we're at home, it's a lot easier because everything's right here within our equipment with Jones Fieldhouse. But on the road, you can only account for so many things. I mean, we do pack backup uniforms for everybody. We pack probably a dozen extra helmets, half a dozen extra pair of shoulder pads. As a contingency, God forbid something turns up missing, we could still play the game without a hitch. And as a good equipment manager, I think even when things are stressful and there's just a lot going on in the equipment room and you have some anxiety about things and you're going through some adversity as far as getting things done in a timely manner, the way I always look at it is I never try to tip my hand to the head coach. I should never put stress upon Coach Loxley. It's my job to make sure there is no stress upon Coach Loxley. It's like we figure out how to get our job done. We get it done in a timely manner. And if there's ever if there's ever an opportunity where we have that stress and anxiety, we just all come together, we attack the issue, and we get it done.
What about, I know like a couple of years ago in the Big Ten, there's been examples in the past, but Indiana had their one player's jersey was spelled like in Indiana. How, like, is that ever something, like, how would that happen? Take us through, like, what would that scenario be like? Because to fans, you kind of look and you're like, Jesus, this football program has all this money, all this stuff, and they can't even get the name of the school right on the front. Like, what would the process be like for that?
I'm kind of going through that process right now, to be completely honest, because, we have the good fortune of having Under Armour as our apparel and football partner, footwear partner. And so I'm actually placing the orders now for the 2024 season. And that includes all the game uniforms for the 2024 season. So it's my job to make sure that I go through extremely carefully with the roster, making sure that I have the spelling correctly. So when I submit my order and then we get the uniforms delivered next June or July, just taking my list and comparing the jerseys that come in to the checklist to make sure there's no spelling errors. I just think what happened in Indiana, I think it was one of those 1 in a million shots. Like, you just assume that the spelling is correct. And I know the equipment guy up there really well. He's a great guy. I think it was just one of those things that you just assumed it was right, and it just bit him in the butt. But they do a great job up there in Indiana, and it's one of those things that it gives you anxiety. But I think if you do a good job and you go through your system checks, like I said, I work closely with Nat Park, one of my assistants, who does an amazing job. Like, that sort of thing with me when we get our uniforms in, to go through and check to make sure that the number is right, the spelling is right, the Big Ten logo is on the chest, that sort of thing. That prevents some of that anxiety. But you still go through. You just worry about those things. I think as an EQ guy, I think from the time training camp starts, on or about August 1st until the time the season concludes, after a bowl game, you just deal with that. It's just part of the job, of the stress of the job, to make sure that you account for everything and for everybody. And like I said earlier, you're accounting for approximately 120 players, but then like another 90 to 100 staff members that you have to make sure that you make accommodations for, with everything they need on a daily basis, from apparel to footwear to uniforms, that sort of thing. So it's a challenge some days.
So I got to ask, I'm indebted to, if what you're designing the jerseys for next year, what can Terps fans look forward to, maybe for any new exciting drops coming, and what might they be?
I think for next year, with 2023, obviously we transitioned to Terp script, which is cool because it pays homage to the past and the history of our football program. And I think it's been really well received. I think from our fan base, I know it's been really well received from within the building. I think our players love it a great deal. The recruits that come through here and we dress out on recruiting visits, they love the Terp script. I know there is a decent amount of people that still love the Maryland Pride uniform because it was so unique, as far as like the hand painted helmet with our state flag on it. I'm caught in the middle. I love the Pride uniform because it is what I was used to and accustomed to when I got here. But I think the Terp script is pretty historical around here, and I think it's something that's got to be here to stay. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you know, we're going to wear all white this week, and so we haven't worn a white helmet yet this year, and we haven't worn a white Terp script helmet yet. So we will wear that this Saturday when we play the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I got one here if you want to see it. Our guys are excited about wearing it. And we're going to be white from head to toe, our cleats, our pants, our jersey, and our helmet. So it's a look that we haven't worn in a long time. Our guys are excited about wearing the icy white.
Any new ones next year, or are we sticking?
I don't think so. I think for 24, I think we're going to stay the course for 24. The great thing about working with Under Armour is they're so incredibly innovative with their presentation. They really get excited about collaborating with the University of Maryland and presenting some new styles and new concepts to us. So I think that's something that is probably discussed, but I think it's discussed between, those designers at Under Armour and then our athletic department. And but I think for right now, I think we're going to stay the course. It's what we have for the 2024 season.
So if you're ordering the jerseys for next season now, how early did you know that the script was coming back, and did you have to kind of keep that as a secret?
That's a good point. The funny thing is, I placed my order last year, and I turned it in right around Halloween or right around this time last year, and I found out that we were going to go to the Terp script about a week after I placed my order. So it presented a little bit of a challenge to go back in and modify your game uniform orders to accommodate for each one of the colors with the white, the red, the black, and the gold. But it was exciting for the transition. It was exciting to be a part of it, and it takes a while to formulate those things, to determine from a roster standpoint which players are going to be here and which players aren't, which players are on their last year of eligibility, which players maybe have an extra year because of injury. And you have to take all those things into account when you're placing your order for uniforms, because like this year, I think we had 45 new players on our roster that weren't part of our roster in 2022, which is crazy. But I think that's just a sign of the times with college football, with the transfer portal and NIL and that sort of thing. Like, I don't think you're going to have that consistency where kids come to your school and they're there for 3, 4, or 5 years. I think it's going to be a rotating door, which is, I don't know how I feel about it, but.
So before we wrap up, I have to ask just one last thing. Talk about kind of your role in the Duke's Mayo Bowl and making sure Loxley didn't get too dirty there.
Yeah. We talked about it beforehand. It was one of those situations where he just wanted me to make sure that I had a quick change of clothing for him. And we walked towards midfield, and he knew he was going to get dunked with the Duke's Mayo. One of the things that was great is that Noggin Boss, who's been a great friend of our program, they sent Coach Locks some of those oversized baseball caps with the Maryland logo on it. And we had that, and it was great. Coach came up with the idea of wearing that on his head, so when they dumped the Duke's Mayo mayonnaise on his head, that he wouldn't get it all over himself. But they dumped so much mayonnaise, it was all over the place. In fact, there was a couple of things that that mayonnaise just doesn't come out of. I mean, it's just one of those things that you try your very best and doesn't come out of. But it was pretty cool. It was great. It was fun to be a part of. They were a great host city and host committee for us, but winning down there in Charlotte and beating NC State was great. Anytime you win, it brings so much excitement and happiness to the team. One thing that I've learned through the years of working in equipment is that you spend so much time with these guys, the coaches and the players and everybody else, that you become so vested in it that the wins feel so great, but the losses hurt just as much the other way. So it's hard. It changes the atmosphere in the building. Like the week after a win in the building, everybody's happy and everybody says hello and asking how you're doing. And the week after a loss, it's quiet. But Coach Loxley does an amazing job of righting the ship. It's 24 hours. Whether you win or lose, you have to turn the page and focus on the next opponent and put all that stuff behind you, whether it was the elation of a great win or the sadness of a loss. So he does a great job with that. But like I said, working here and being part of the Maryland football family, it's great to be back. I'm very fortunate that this has given me an opportunity to come home. I've had 2 daughters that have graduated from here with nursing degrees. They both work in Georgetown right now as nurses. One is a NICU nurse and one is an organ transplant nurse. And I've got another daughter here that's currently a junior. So Maryland is home for us, and we all love it here. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I don't think I would take another job, to be completely honest. Maybe one job, maybe the New York Yankees equivalent manager, but I don't think that's coming up anytime soon.
Well, thanks again. We do a quick rapid fire segment with all of our guests. So I'm going to take you through that, and then we can get up out of here. So you ready to go?
Sure.
Are you a laundry guy person at home, or are you done with it after the day's work?
I am not a laundry person at home. In fact, I usually bring my laundry to work and do it myself because my stuff turns up missing at home. Like I can't tell you how many times. I don't know what happens. It just goes and it disappears. I don't know what happens.
The deal, are you a superstitious guy? So if Maryland wins with certain jerseys, are you like, hey guys, like we got to wear this one this week, or is that not something you think?
I wish I was, but with the way the college, I am superstitious, no doubt about it. But with the way things are set up within college football, the home team has the right to determine what uniform they're going to wear. So if we go on the road, we're pretty much always in our whites. At home, obviously, we have some specialty games where Coach and Damon and Colleen get together to determine what jerseys we're going to wear, whether it's our black uniform or our gold uniform. But I am superstitious. I try to do the same routine every week as far as how I lay out the coach's apparel and clothing. The stuff that I put on Coach Loxley's desk, whether it's home or away. I'm superstitious. I do it all at the same time. I do it. It's there is superstition in everything that I do as far as game day goes.
What's the toughest thing to get out of a jersey when doing laundry?
Two things. Sometimes teams paint their fields, like their logo. That's really hard to get out. And funny thing, the most difficult thing to get out, there's two. Gatorade, like the fruit punch Gatorade, is really hard to get out. And the other thing, surprisingly, is ryegrass. Most teams play on like a Bermuda type surface, but when we go to the fall, a lot of teams overseed their field with ryegrass because it'll germinate during the fall temperature change as the Bermuda grass will die out. And because of that, ryegrass stains are an absolute pain in the butt to get out. It's a challenge that we face every single week, but that's why the equipment guy's best friend is like the red pants or the black pants, because he don't have to worry about that stuff. But the white pants are a challenge for sure, and as are the white jerseys.
How much of it is a struggle with these recruit photo shoots? Do you have to work extra time to get them in the right jerseys and all that stuff?
We do it because, listen, we all know in this building, and I think everybody across college football knows that recruiting is the lifeblood of your program. But without those guys coming through the door, it directly correlates to the amount of success that you're going to have in the fall. It does sometimes present a challenge, but our recruiting staff does an amazing job of setting it up in a way that you're not overwhelmed on a certain day. Sometimes you'll have 6 or 8 recruits come through on a certain day, and they'll push the rest of the recruits to the following weekend. I think the NCAA right now has they've put it up to vote where the only people that will be allowed to dress out for photos and stuff will be actually official visits. So if you're not here on an official visit, you won't be able to dress out. So, when the equipment guys heard that, I think we all smiled in entirety. So, but we understand that, like I said, it's the lifeblood of our program. The kids get a real good, big kick out of it. Plenty of Instagram shots to take, and
right.
But it's cool. And what we do is, as a step, we put every single uniform combination out there and give them as much stuff, like from an accessory standpoint, like wristbands and gloves and headbands and all that other stuff, to allow them to swag out a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time. Good luck the rest of the way, and thanks for hopping on another show.
All right, guys. Go Terps.
We saw Drew show us the white helmets. We got a little sneak peek at those early on, and they look great on Saturday. Can't say the same about the game, though. Maryland obviously won in walk-off fashion. Jack Howes making the game-winning field goal, but I can't really say that was a very exciting or fun game to watch. It was great for Sicko's committee on Twitter, though. 8 combined turnovers between the two teams. Guys, it felt like both teams wanted to lose, to be honest, but Maryland walked away with a win and secured bowl eligibility. So obviously, people in College Park happy about that. But I don't know, what were your takeaways from the win?
It's the same issues that we've been seeing throughout the whole year. I mean, they're undisciplined when it comes to penalties. They had 10 for 92 yards in turnovers. Turnovers have been an issue for them. They did make up for it, like you said, by forcing 5. And then the run game, it's been on and off throughout the whole year for I would say one half. You could even say three quarters against Nebraska. The run game was non-existent, but they did make up for it in that second half. 70 yards coming, about 70 yards in the fourth quarter. But second half, they had 19 attempts for 101 yards. And you got to hope, if you're on the team, if you're a fan, that they keep up that run game going forward.
I would say absolutely. If Maryland's run game looks like it's looked in the past 4 weeks, they're going to have a lot more. If they're going to win any more games, the games are going to be 13-10. I mean, Loxley said at the beginning of the year he wanted to compete for Big Ten championships, and winning games 13-10, that is Big Ten football. But I don't think that's really the way he imagined it when he said that. Other thing I will say is the all white uniforms and helmets and whatever they're 1-0. So I mean, I don't know, but team did well enough somehow to earn Fox big noon kickoff. So I don't know. That was pretty wild. I was not expecting that.
I'll say this about the uniforms. I was going into Gold Rush game very high on them. Watching them from the stands, the Gold Rush uniforms look terrible. I will take the white uniforms 10 out of 10 times over the gold uniforms.
Yeah, I think that the white, all white just looks crispy, and I think that the helmets did a lot of work with those unis. But you guys talked about it, and I think it's so true. The run game, and Brendan really talked about it, Big Ten football. This week, obviously, as we kind of move forward, Michigan coming to town, talk about a run game. They didn't attempt a forward pass in the second half. That was a completion. 27 straight runs against Penn State, who had the number 1 ranked rush defense heading into Saturday. Very impressive win. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards did their thing. But I want to talk a little bit about historical context in the Big Ten and when upsets do happen. So I have some stats here for us. When an upsetting team, so a top 10 team in the Big Ten over the past 3 full seasons, when that top 10 team has lost to an underdog, how many rushing yards do you think the winning team is averaging compared to the top dog in the Big Ten who loses, the top 10 team? What do you guys think?
I would say going into that game, you're asking for how many in the game. Okay. In that game, I'd say they probably averaged about 190 rushing yards.
Bingo. 192 for the upsetting team.
Wow, I had no idea.
Mike, what do you think? What do you think the underdog, or not the underdog, the team the top 10 team, what do you think they're averaging in that game?
It's got to be under 50, no?
No, 105. So, I mean, if you're looking at top 10 teams, that's still a 75 plus yard difference in the run game between those two. I mean, you look at games like Oregon beating Ohio State 269-182. You have Illinois beating Wisconsin, who was top ranked at the time, 141-136. You have Michigan State beating Michigan, that Kenneth Walker game, 199-146. Now flip it around to College Park. We all tie it back to Maryland sports. In Maryland's game against top 10 Big Ten teams, how many rushing yards do you think that the Terps are averaging per game?
This one has got to be under 50.
Is this all time in the Big Ten?
No,
this year?
Sorry. The past 4 years, including this year, 4 full seasons, not 2020.
Against ranked teams?
Yep, top 10 ranked teams.
They're averaging 12 yards rushing.
80.91, but that's like the big dogs in the Big Ten. So
yeah.
The winning team, though, the top 10 team is averaging 192. So that's over 100-yard difference in games that Maryland plays a top 10 team. When we just talked about when upsets do happen, it's like flip it around. The upsetting team is averaging nearly 100 yards more than the losers. So I think that when we talk about this Saturday, it's a huge test, right? Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, that O-line, Michigan's defensive line is one of the best in the country. But I think if Maryland has any chance of winning, they're going to need some explosive run plays from Talia, from Hemby, and then they're going to just have to pray that Michigan's run game is off or have their best rushing defense effort of the season. And I don't know. I think that's where the game starts and ends, not even just through the air. It has to start on the ground for the Terps.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stats say it best. The one thing I wanted to ask you, Sam, is before you were covering Maryland football, you kept a pretty close eye on Michigan football. And so, give us a little bit of context for how you think the Michigan team is going to feel going into the rest of the season without their head coach on the sidelines?
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting because this Friday, I believe that there's a hearing scheduled for Harbaugh to potentially be reinstated. But yeah, I'm going to be honest, out of all my years, and Brendan's right, I grew up in Michigan, so I followed the team, pretty closely. Out of all my years, A, I've never seen a better Michigan football team, and B, I've never seen one tune out distractions as well. I mean, all the ingredients for them to lose on Saturday were there, right? Penn State's at home, second biggest crowd in their school history. Michigan's coach is suspended on the plane into Happy Valley. Their passing game is anemic, not doing anything. And what do? They just rip off a dominating win against Penn State. I think that it honestly, and this might sound crazy, in some ways, I think it might help Michigan that he's suspended, because I think it gives them an extra level of, they can play the underdog mentality, oh, everyone's against Michigan, that type of thing. And I think that honestly gives them a little bit of juice, but they don't really need it, to be honest with you. They're so good. They have depth at every position. I mean, when's the last time Maryland had an offensive lineman drafted in the top 5 rounds, right? Michigan is going to have 7 offensive linemen, The Athletic says, picked in the NFL at some point. Maryland, if you took any of Michigan's top 7 offensive linemen, they would probably start on Maryland at any spot, which is crazy to say, but I think that just shows how deep Michigan is. So it's really going to take Maryland's going to have to play their best game of the season, and Michigan's going to have to play a C- or worse effort for the Terps to pull off the upset. I know, Mike, you're a little more optimistic about their chances, but I think that when you look at it in totality, Michigan is just such a better team.
Yeah, well, if they thought Happy Valley was bad, just wait until they walk into the hostile SAQ Stadium where half the fans are Michigan fans. I mean, if we're all being honest, they have no shot to beat Michigan. However, looking on the optimistic side, just, season as a whole, it's the 3rd straight year for them going bowling. It's the first time since 2006, 2008 that they've done that. So there are some positives with the win over Nebraska.
I will rebuttal and say Maryland has won 6 games, but one was against the FCS team. So
it just is, we keep going around and around with this argument, and I think it just speaks to the continuation of every Maryland season feeling the same. And I think that at a certain point that has to end. You have to change something to where maybe you lose one to a bad team but upset another team. Something like even last year felt I think for the fans felt good because it was okay, we competed against Michigan. We competed against Ohio State. It's this year it hasn't been close, and I really don't think it's going to be close on Saturday. So I just think...
I can understand where you guys are coming from, but I also was growing up watching Maryland football in that continuous stage where I would go to the games to watch Stephon Diggs. He would play good. Maryland might lose, but I was able to watch a really cool player who would get drafted, Yeah. So that was kind of,
that's
how seasons were going when I was growing up. So seeing them now, it's Maryland's not at that tier yet where they're a Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. But at the same time, it feels like Maryland and Coach Loxley, they've been building up this program to a point where they're consistently making it to bowl games. We'll see if they win a 3rd straight this year, but this is way better than the program had been in over a decade.
Definitely. I think that we can all agree that they've taken big steps. It's just now I think you have to take another step, because if you just stay flatlined, you're not paying Loxley to do that, right? Or we can all agree on that.
Before we head into other sports, the last thing, I think, let's predict how many points Maryland will score. Michigan's defense has obviously been incredible. The most points they've allowed all year is 15, and that was against Penn State. So any prediction on how many points Maryland will score?
14. They get a garbage time touchdown.
They'll get 3.
I was going to say, I think I'll go in the middle. I'll go with 10. I
cannot see, watching the turnovers on Saturday, I cannot see how Talia and them are able to consistently move the ball against Michigan's defense. That just seems like one of the biggest challenges they'll face this year.
Yeah, it'll be a tough task for Michigan, but it'll be an interesting game to watch for sure. And we sound, kind of down on Maryland football, who won
Imagine how down we're going to sound about the rest of the Terp sports because, wow, what a brutal weekend of Maryland athletics. Guys, we can start with basketball, men's and women's side. Women have a little bit more of an excuse. We can start there, I think. Mike, a dominating defeat at the hands of South Carolina, who I'm not going to lie, through 2 games look like a top 5 team, maybe not 4, not 5, not 3, not 2 level of title contenders. What did you see in the Terps loss to the Gamecocks?
Yeah, they lost some players to the draft, but it does not look like that if you watched the game the other day. Maryland, self-inflicted errors, you could say, was the story of the game for them. South Carolina, they absolutely killed them on the offensive glass. They had 28 second chance points. South Carolina also had 20 more rebounds than Maryland in that game. And then Maryland also had 15 turnovers. They lost the turnover battle. And then South Carolina scored 23 points off of those turnovers. Now, I know that there's another issue that was very prevalent in the loss Sunday, if you want to talk about the lack of depth. It just seemed like South Carolina was able to consistently just bring new players in, bring players out, and no matter what, they were still getting the same production. But
yeah, 7 players in double figures. I mean, nearly had 9 or 10 free set after the game. She's never seen a team do that. I mean, I think you talked about it. Self-inflicted wounds were definitely a problem. But I think the biggest thing, and sometimes I think basketball is as simple as this, the other team is just really friggin' good. Like, you go into that game trying to stop Camila Cardoso, right? Who's 6'7", dominant player, SEC, preseason all-player, first-team all-player, that type of thing. Has a huge height advantage over anybody on Maryland's roster, save Hawa Damboya, who played a little bit but isn't ready for, big-time college basketball. So you devote all your resources to stopping her, and they did that. 4 points in the first half, right? That's like, I was stunned when I saw that stat line. But you look up, and South Carolina has made 12 threes by the end of the year or end of the game and shoots 50%. Sometimes it's like how Brenda said, pick your poison, right? They devoted resources inside. They played that zone defense where they just kind of sucked in on the paint, and then South Carolina just sprayed it from deep. And at that point, you have to switch it up. You have to go to man-to-man. So what did they do then? They got killed on the offensive boards because they don't have the height to compete with South Carolina. So I think it was really just, you had to hope that the Gamecocks were going to miss threes. And this year's roster for Dawn Staley is, I think, way better suited. They make a bunch of threes. They have a much better shooting and playmaking guards. And then if you turn the ball over against them, you're not going to win. You're not going to. You have to value the ball. They didn't do that. And that's why they gave up the most points they've ever given up in the Brenda Freeze era. I mean, it was pretty crazy.
I kind of wanted to touch back on the depth of the team because when I was watching it, I thought it was a little alarming how South Carolina, they had 55 points off the bench. Maryland only had 20. 17 came from Bree McDaniel and Allie Quebec. And so far through 2 games, other than Emma Chardon had 10 points in the first game, it's really been Quebec and McDaniel who seem like they'll be constant contributors off the bench, which is alarming because then you have a seven-person rotation. That's not going to get you through the games against Iowa in the Big Ten,
I got to see Riley Nelson see the floor soon. Even if she's turning the ball over, you got to have some sort of dynamic player. And if she doesn't play against UConn, I think questions are going to start to be asked about where she's at because all preseason, they were hyping her up, saying she's going to have this huge impact. One of Brenda's best freshmen she's had, and she's not seeing the floor. Why is that? What's going on? Because I think she just brings a level that they don't really have right now. It's kind of just Shy Sellers ball handling, and that's about it. They need another playmaker, and if she's not there, they could be in some trouble.
Yeah, it is. It's been really weird how she hasn't played because she had a really strong showing in that first exhibition game. She scored over 20 points. And that, I mean, coming out of that game, I felt as if she was going to be a massive roll off the bench or then possibly move into the starting lineup as the season went on. But really, her contributions have been non-existent through 2 games.
Yeah, I think, though, to be fair to Riley, Bree McDaniel didn't play much at the beginning of last year at all. Then she was getting valuable minutes by the end of the year. So I could see her picking up, but they obviously have a huge one on Thursday against Connecticut. Azizi Fudge and Paige Beckers. They have more stuff beyond that. I mean, Naomi, I always forget her last name, but 3 WNBA picks probably on the roster. They're super, super good. It's going to be a tough game. Mike, Brendan, what do you guys think? Do you see any way they can pull out an upset?
Seeing what we just saw against South Carolina, I think that tells you that Maryland's not ready to play at that level of competition yet. But I think going into Connecticut and, playing other close games, playing some of the best competition in the country is going to make this team significantly better when it comes time to play, Big Ten tournament games and NCAA tournament games. I don't think these are negatives, really. I mean, it would have been nice for Maryland fans to see, the South Carolina game be a bit closer. But like you said, Sam, I mean, this is one of the top 5 teams in the country, so it's not all negative.
I gotta agree with Brendan. I gotta view this as a growing game for the team. I think it's gonna be very difficult to beat UConn, and with UConn coming off of an upset loss to NC State. So they have extra motivation to win as well, and just playing in front of their home crowd, which always shows up. It's going to be very difficult for Maryland.
Nika Mule, by the way, and then even throw in Aaliyah Edwards. I mean, their team is stacked. I think it might be like the South Carolina game in which it's close to the first quarter and Maryland kind of hangs around, but then they just kind of take over. I wouldn't expect that many points to be allowed, though. UConn doesn't really do that. They don't have that type of domination, I think. I think it's probably more in like the 90s to a 70 type of loss, if I had to guess. But obviously 2 super tough opponents, so Maryland fans shouldn't be that alarmed. I think you can't really say the same for the men's side, though. Brendan, really just 2 weird, disappointing, bad losses to Davidson and UAB. Take us through the Terps weekend in Asheville.
Yeah, I mean, you can be a little bit upset if, Maryland women's basketball loses to South Carolina, but it's not like you said, they lost to Davidson and UAB. Two sentences I didn't really think I'd be saying in this episode. And Maryland just didn't really look like themselves, didn't look like the team they were last year. Donta Scott and Jameer Young and Juju Reese really didn't look like what people thought they were going to be going into this season. And, 2 games that if Maryland plays a couple possessions better, they win. Both 1-possession losses. So I don't know. Those games are really hard to say, because if Maryland makes a couple more plays down the stretch, they win those games. And we're sitting here and we're like, well, Maryland's 3-0, but, they played 2, scary close games. I mean, they wouldn't have played UAB if they'd won the first game, but you understand what I'm saying? Like, just to that point where, there are 1-possession games, but overall, pretty ugly games by Maryland.
The defensive breakdowns against Davidson were unacceptable. Donta Scott had a couple plays where the game-winning 3 in particular, he's sitting in the paint, pointing at the shooter on the outside when they're in man-to-man defense. And I don't know their health principles, but I do know some stuff about basketball. And I don't think in a tie game with the game on the line, you're that far deep in the paint on a driver when you have a shooter in the corner. You can't be that 2 feet inside the charge area. Just not good enough. Scott wasn't very good for the first 2 games. He's got to pick it up. The defensive breakdowns, I get it. It's early in the year, but it showed up way too many times. And then the turnovers in the UAB game, they let the kid from LSU, Gaines, it was his personal highlight show a couple times. He got a couple breakaway dunks where it was wild. I thought Jameer played much better in the second game than he did the first. Really kind of, I think, brought them back in it in that UAB game. But I agree, Brendan. I mean, you really got to hope that they find a way here in these next couple games, because it's not going to get the job done if the way they're playing right now. And I know the starting lineup has been a big question. I think that they really are searching for production at that 3 spot. Mike, it's been Noah Batchelor. I think it's got to start. The question's got to start about if Jamie Kaiser should be in that lineup, because he's looked pretty good, I think, through these first 2 games. At least a threat to shoot it from beyond the arc.
Yeah, they're clearly unsure of who's going to be that 5th starter right now. They have the 4 spots pretty locked up at this point. DHS, Jameer, Donta, Juju, but they started the first 2 games with Jordan Geronimo. Clearly that didn't work out. They switched to Noah Batchelor for the UAB game. that didn't seem to work out against UAB. He was practically just running cardio out there. The only stat he had was 1 rebound. He had the game. And I think it's pretty telling that 3-point shooting is part of the reason for that switch, because they had Noah Bachelor take the last shot against Davidson. Trusted him to take that shot out of anybody else on the team, 3-point shooting wise. They're shooting 22.6% this year, which is second worst in the Big Ten. But also, Bachelor himself is shooting 18% on the year, and that's the guy you have taking the 3 to tie the game.
Yeah,
That's not great. And 3-pointers are really the only thing he has done so far this season. Those are the only shots, literally speaking, that he's taken. And the only time he's gone to the foul line was when he got fouled on a 3-point attempt.
he's got to be better. Got to be more of a threat from beyond the arc, and I think that's why Kaiser could easily slot into that spot. At least he's making shots, and giving you that sort of threat from the outside. Brendan, do you think that that's a switch they make sooner rather than later here? It'd be a tough time for freshmen to make their first start on Friday at Villanova, but I think it's getting to that point where you kind of have to start thinking about it.
I would actually expect to see Jordan Geronimo start against Villanova. I don't think that he's looked incredible in the first couple of games, but he has played a lot more minutes than anybody else coming off the bench. And so I do think they'll go with him, but I do think you'll see Jamie Kaiser start games as the season goes on. It just depends when that switch happens. I mean, I think clearly his upside is much better than Bachelor and Geronimo. I think most people can see that. So I think it's just a matter of time till he becomes the starter. But I think as we talked about the Villanova game, I don't think Geronimo will start. Do you guys want to guess? So Villanova played a game tonight, Monday night, against Penn, the Ivy League school. Would anybody like to guess the final score of that game? And then also guess how many minutes Hakeem Hart played, who was obviously on Maryland last year.
I didn't pay attention to any results tonight. Penn usually, I feel like, plays slow style. I'm going to go 63-60. And
Okay.
Hakeem, I'm going to play 17 minutes.
Okay.
I know he's been a 6-man.
I would have said Villanova won by 10, like 75-65. Hakeem played 20 minutes. What actually happened, though?
Villanova 72, Penn 76. So Villanova lost. So this huge matchup early in the season, Hakeem Hart, rematch game, whatever you want to call it, against Maryland. He played 9 minutes. Crazy. Bunch of question marks here. You have two teams that you probably figured were going to be undefeated going into this game, and now it's still a big game, and both teams really, really now need this win. But
yeah, you really need it if you're Maryland, and like you said, you need it if you're Villanova B. But I think that this game, Maryland, if they win it, I think you're back kind of where you're at, because you probably expected a loss to Villanova and wins in those spots. But I don't think you can. I mean, you can, but starting 1-3 is a pretty bad way to get the year kicked off.
I mean, Hakeem Hart didn't take a shot tonight.
The Hakeem Hart revenge game is no longer in play.
I'm going to be honest, he might not be doing well at Villanova, but I underestimated the impact that his loss would have on this team.
Thank you.
And I would have thought, because 3-point shooting was a problem itself last year for the Terps, they shot 33%, which isn't good. So I know Willard has said multiple times he wanted to increase physicality and how tough they were over the offseason. And obviously they brought in Jordan Geronimo for that. But he made no effort to improve the 3-point shooting, it seems, transfer-wise either. So I don't... He loses.
I would say yes and no. Yes and no. Chance Stevens is injured. Chance Stevens is injured and probably he's out the whole year. And he was, called himself the sniper from 3-point range. So I think he did try to bring in someone, but just got injured. So
Chance Stevens was never in that mix to start. Chance Stevens, if you're relying on Chance Stevens, who is a Loyola Marymount, I think is where he was from. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you're relying on him to be the difference in your season, that's not great. But I also think, to be fair, we're kind of it's 3 games in, and I think Donta will start to shoot better. Jameer is going to shoot it better. I would guess that 5th starter eventually, either Bachelor, Kaiser, or maybe somebody else, kind of adds some spacing. DHS, I don't think is going to... I told you, I said, DHS, the shot, I'm just a little worried about it. he's got to get it figured out. And freshmen don't generally shoot amazing, so that'd be the spot I'd be the most worried about, because he's been good, but if he's not going to space the floor and Jameer's not an amazing shooter, that's two spots in the backcourt that aren't really a threat from beyond the arc as much as you'd like to.
So yeah, I mean, I think some of my predictions from earlier in the season, I would still stand with them. I still think this Maryland team is good. I think this is a good Maryland basketball team. However, it was just not the start that anybody expected. So I think they'll make that transition. I think they'll probably still finish in the top 4 of the Big Ten. But
yeah, still they got to get it around quick. But the season is young for the Terp basketball squad. Season is over for the Terp field hockey team. Their run ended quick. First time they did not make the Final Four since 2020. Brendan lost to the Cavaliers, who just continue to have their number. It feels like, tough game at the Plex. What happened for Missy Maharg's team?
Yeah, shutout loss against Virginia. Maryland came in pretty strong going into that game, had a win over Old Dominion. I hosted the show talking all about field hockey like the week before. Personally, I thought, this Maryland team could get back to the Final Four. I didn't think Virginia was going to stop in their way, but, we'll really just have to see what they can do to rebuild. Mike, I know you have thoughts on this. You covered the team last year. You know the roster pretty well. What were your thoughts on the game?
I'll touch on the roster in a sec, but they got off to that slow start that I feel like we've mentioned a couple times in the past on the pod. I mean, they were outshot 16-6, 11-1 with shots on goal. They were absolutely dominated by the Virginia offense that scored a goal in each single quarter, while it seemed like Maryland's offense could get nothing going. So it was the same issues that kept coming up during the season in some of those losses. But looking forward to next season with the roster they have a lot of pieces coming back. They have Hope Rose coming back for her senior season. They have Alyssa Klobosco, who started in goal as a freshman. She'll be back as a sophomore, have experience under her belt. Erica Morris-Adams, she'll be back for a junior year. Hannah Boss, she's going to be a junior. Jessie Holloman will be back. Macy Bradford will be back. So they have some pieces that will be back, but obviously this is not the finish to the season that Missy Maharg or her team would have wanted or expected.
Yeah, I think that, Maharg's team obviously, outperformed expectations, I think, at the beginning. But as the season went on, you just shutout loss like that. And it wasn't really like they had a bunch of, open chances. They just failed to convert, it felt like. There was never really an offensive push. Virginia just kind of, from start to finish, dominated. But bright future ahead for her team. So they'll be back. I think you just got to find a way to get over the top here, make it back to the Natty, because that's where they expect to be every year at this point.
So moving away from field hockey, their season's obviously over. One of the only fall sports to still be going is volleyball. Since we last talked about them, they are 1-3. Losses against Michigan State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Did not win a set in those games. And then back at home, Maryland beat Ohio State 3-0. NCAA tournament is pretty much not a possibility at this point, but 2 weeks left. Maryland needs to go 4-0 to have a 500 record in the Big Ten, and to do this, they'd have to get 2 ranked wins. I think if Maryland can go 2-2 and finish the season, 2 games under 500, that'd be the best they can do at this point. But I think let's wait till the season's over, and I can give them a much bigger picture look at going forward and stuff like that. But they have 4 games left, and not going to count them out of any of them, but it would be very tough for them to finish 4-0 and even finish 3-1.
Yeah, I think that this volleyball team, they've done enough to feel comfortable, but this was kind of a interesting year for them. I think once the season's wrapped up, we can kind of look more at where they finished. But 2-2, I think, would be a positive way to go out on the 23 campaign, which has been up and down for Adam Hughes' squad, but mostly a pretty solid season, I think we would agree, for him, kind of getting back to maybe what they expected last year.
The goal for next year, though, has to be postseason push. Like, there's no question about it. Am I wrong?
I don't think so. I think postseason appearance is kind of where they should be aimed at, especially they got some talent coming back. I think Sire's back. A lot of their young players will be back. I think they need to dip into the portal a little more. Is kind of my thoughts. Go free agent hunting a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with all that stuff. The transfer portal will be big. It'll be interesting to see who leaves and who comes back from this team. So we'll have to see. But the picks for you and me the last 2 weeks have been pretty much atrocious, and Sam is completely running away with it. So give us the numbers.
Atrocious. My picks, I've had back-to-back 2-1 weeks. You can't project onto me as well. But if we're going into the standings, we got Sam at the top still. He finished last place last year, by the way, so a little bit of a redemption year for Sam.
To be fair,
I said it's a redemption year.
No, because last year's finish was, I was like a game under 500 and was like 2 games back. I'm blowing you 2 out of the water this year. It's not even close. So don't bring that garbage. You said don't project on from Brendan. Don't project with that crap onto me.
I called it it's a redemption year for Sam.
It's a dominating year is what it's been. Give us the standings and let the numbers talk, pal.
So at the top, we got Sam redeeming last year at 19-14. Then I keep talking about this freaking push that Brendan has. This push is literally the MVP of Brendan's season. Brendan is ahead of me 14-18-1, while I am 14-19. So you're lucky that push has you ahead of me this week, pal, but wait for a pod next week because there's going to be no more of this funny business with the push.
All right, Mike, you're pretty fired up. Get us started here.
I'll also say that we got 4 weeks of regular season college football, and then last year we picked 6 bowl games for the final week or weeks.
Anything can happen.
Exactly. My path to going back-to-back is still wide open. So,
all right, Mike, you've been a lot of talk. Let's get it going. You start us out here.
All right, let's go. At number 1, we got Colorado plus 4.5 at Washington State. This is a bounce-back game for Coach Prime and the boys in Boulder. Next, we got Northwestern favored by 1 point versus Purdue. Northwestern is just a better team, and it's at home. 1 point. Northwestern is 5-5 this year.
Okay.
And then last, we got East Carolina and Navy under 33.5. It just has the feels of an under game. ECU has hit the under 7 out of 10 times this season, while Navy's hit it 6 out of 9 times. However, knowing my luck this season, they're going to score like 70 points combined.
I'm feeling a 0-3 this week from Big Mike, Brendan. I don't like any of those picks. I'll go next. These are the ones you should listen to.
Just fade me then. If you really feel that way, just fade every single one of my picks.
I tweeted it, last week, and I'll tweet it again. Started off with me. I'm staying in College Park for game 1. Michigan minus 20 against the Terps. I think they're just on a steamrolling path, and I think Maryland's just a speed bump on the way. My second game, I'm going to have NC State plus 3.5. They're taking on Virginia Tech. Vatek, not very good. NC State, former Terps bowl opponent. I don't know why. I just like that line, like the Wolfpack in that one. And then lastly, but not least, I'm digging back into MAC action, baby. Going back to my roots, from the Midwest. I'm going Ohio Bobcats minus 8.5 against Central Michigan. Ohio's actually a solid team. They rank 22nd in passing success rate according to Action. So I'm riding with the Bobcats on that one.
I am strongly considering fading Mike right now, taking every pick he took and just flipping it. But I'm not going to do that because that would make him mad, and he's probably going to get at least one right. So statistically, it's a bad choice. So I'm going to take my own picks that I already wrote down. If I could be a little dishonest.
You would still go 2-1 if I got one right. So
okay. All right, maybe I'll fade one of them. We'll see. First pick, Penn State minus 20.5 against Rutgers. Penn State bouncing back against that Michigan loss. I think they're going to absolutely blow them out. I also don't think the Rutgers offense has been that good this year. Iowa, who played Rutgers last weekend, is now playing Illinois. I think Iowa will score at least 4 points. And, knowing the way Iowa's defense has played, I don't know if Illinois will score, so I'll take Iowa minus 3.5. And then you say, dude, I like that. And then I'll also take Duke minus 3.5 against UVA. Duke hasn't looked incredible. They had a really strong start to the season, but I would just like to think that Duke will win that game by more than 4 points. So
that's actually a really good line because the Duke North Carolina game was actually one of the best over the weekend I watched.
Good game. Did Riley Leonard play or no? Was he
nope, there? He's hurt.
Is he done for the year?
I believe so.
Damn.
Which is not fun because I think everybody enjoyed watching Duke and their run that they had to start.
Yeah, it was cool to see a basketball school become a football school. Love for that to happen in Maryland one of these years, but I guess we're students here aren't bound for that. Instead of good football action, we get good, terrific Terps. So everyone can look forward to that every week. At least that's consistent. Brendan, what do you got for us?
What if I told you guys the University of Maryland golf course record was once held by someone who didn't play professional or collegiate golf? In fact, that person was a boxer and a track star in college. Frank Cronin, who graduated from the University of Maryland in 1939, was a star in every event he tried. Cronin was built on pure athleticism, which led him to 5 championships in the quarter mile and 1 in pole vault. Cronin almost never lost, as he went undefeated in boxing at the 155-pound level. In addition, he was undefeated in track dual meets. So I know what you're thinking. How did Cronin have the golf course record? What does track and boxing have to do with it? Well, that's because he was the UMD golf coach, and he didn't just coach golf, he also coached boxing at Maryland. As his time as coach, he coached 3 national champions in boxing and 8 All-American golfers. After graduating from the University of Maryland, became a boxing coach and then a golf coach. But then Cronin had to leave. He left his jobs at UMD to serve in the Army during World War II. And when he returned to College Park, he became the university's director of golf and associate professor of physical education. Cronin was a driving force in the opening of the University of Maryland golf course and oversaw a golfing program that helped produce Diane Berman, George Burns, and fellow terrific Terp Fred Funk. Oh yeah, in his course record of 64 strokes held for about 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Cronin.
Only got out on the UMD course a couple of times. I will not be setting course records though. Like our
you're not gonna beat Frank's record there. You don't think you can't get a 63 in? So
maybe if Frank caddies me, then we'll have a chance.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was another good one, golf related, which I always love. Hopefully a better week of sports here coming up for Maryland athletics. It was a tough one last week, but it was a fun episode of Under the Shell. And you can listen to this and next week's episode and the week after that and the week after that on Under the Shell at Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your pod. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the places at Under the Shell. Follow all of us on Twitter. You can get your content.
And you can take my picks, go to Testudo Times official betting partner, DraftKings.
Do not do that. That's like throwing away money. But anyway, whatever you do with the pod information, you do yourself. We hope you have all the good luck in any sort of endeavors you participate in this upcoming week. From the Under the Shell crew, have a good rest of your week, guys.
Guess what? You got Under the Shell podcast. Nobody does it better.